best place I'd like to start today is sort of you taking us back to where it started for you and actually how your journey into yoga began. That would be a great place to start.
Sure. Well, my journey's kind of a long one, so I don't want to spend too much time on that because I could talk forever. But uh, I am currently 49 years old, and I started yoga when I was 19 at a time in my life where I think a lot of people start yoga, which is at college. Now, this was like 1990s for me, and yoga was pretty rare. And I was in Chicago at the time. There weren't really yoga studios even. And so I was in a theater conservatory, and one of our movement classes was to go to this yoga teacher's apartment and learn yoga. And so that was like my introduction into yoga. It was like I'd been on the spiritual path as pretty young. I got into meditation books in my teens. I was already meditating. I maybe heard the word yoga, but I don't really, I didn't really know what it was because again, it's not like it was super popular in the 90s yet. And yeah, but when I was introduced to it, it was like the physical meeting the spiritual for me, and I was hooked. That was it. I have never looked back since that moment.
What was it actually that you found that helped that bridge between spiritual and the physical? Like, what was it sort of specifically that helped bridge that gap? Because I've heard that from we had another guest on our show last week, Reese, and he's an expert in breath work, and he actually said something similar. He was saying that breath work is a great way to amplify your meditation practice or help you get into a meditative state because there's something physical that you can do that helps you sort of, I guess, almost like a stepping stone into meditation. Was that sort of the same experience for you?
Yeah, I think I was very active as a child, and I was actually a competitive tennis player. I was training to go pro. And so I was very disciplined with my physical practice of sport, basically as an athlete. And I just didn't really know that there could be a physical, mindful movement practice. And I think, I look back now and in hindsight, a lot of my discipline that I apply to my yoga practice, I actually got from training as an athlete. And you'll hear a lot of that kind of coaching come out in my teaching. It's, I think, something that differentiates me a little bit from other yoga teachers. In some ways, I'm a little bit more of a coach than a yoga, like all kind of yoga teacher that people expect to hear in the classroom. So I think it was just, yeah, really the marrying of the physical and the spiritual. And then, of course, as you journey on the yoga path, you realize a lot of it, if not all of it, is really the mind, is really um, learning to focus, harness the mind. We mindset is such a buzzword now, but so it's a similar kind of idea where we can learn to either focus the mind. The mind is not always necessarily going to be quiet. It has its own agenda, it has its own things it needs to do. So if we can learn, in yoga we call it single pointed focusness, if we can learn to focus on one thing, then we can connect more with our body, and that's that mind body connection. So I think that was a firing off moment for me. It was like, oh, spiritual, mind, body, all in harmony here, working together.
Very curious because I played soccer or football for most of my life as well, and I'm curious, like, what are the sort of principles that you take from your tennis career that you say you put into your coaching or your teaching as a yoga teacher? I'm curious, like, what are some of those things that you sort of put in that other yoga teachers might not?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And when I look at really my first online series that I ever produced, which is called Activate Your Core, I took this exact idea that I'm about to talk about, which is conditioning the body for your sport or movement practice. And up until recently, you didn't really see that in the yoga world. Like there's almost this pretension that, a true yoga student or practitioner just does yoga. There's like this purist kind of attitude. But the truth is, yoga isn't a perfect physical practice. And without conditioning your body, sorry, that's my puppy, without conditioning your body, building strength, that kind of stuff, you can really, I don't want to say injure, but it's just, you'll break down after a while. And that is what I took from my childhood as an athlete. Like, yes, I was on the court 5 hours a day, but after that, we would condition, or before that, we would condition. We would run the stairs, we'd be in the gym room. So there's like conditioning your body for, and then also the recovery aspect. Again, I think that's something more new in the yoga world. And really, I almost feel as a yoga teacher, I have to, especially more type A people that want the physical practice, I have to educate them on why it's so important to take more restful practices sometimes and balance out things and give your body time to recover. So these are things that I bring into my teaching and my online series that I think are a little bit unique. Like, it's one of the reasons why none of my series are actually named yoga. They're all like activate your flexibility or activate your arm balances, because I do veer outside of the yoga practice to bring different techniques in to build a sustainable practice for people so that they can do yoga in a healthy way.
Super cool. I mean, that's a really interesting point. I've never thought about it that way, but I always, when I thought about yoga, I always thought of it as sort of almost a restorative practice anyway, but it is something that you still need to condition yourself, and it's something that you do, from my understanding, need to take rest from at time to time. You can't just be going full 100% all the time. There needs to be a restorative part of it as well, which it sounds like you're encouraging your students to do.
Yeah, I think that that's a normal conception that yoga is like relaxing or soothing, and some yoga is, but some yoga isn't. And a student can only go to, let's say, power yoga and be in a hot room and be doing tons of chaturanga push-ups and, strength stuff, and then never have that balance basically to reset their central nervous system. So I think that that's one of the biggest myths about yoga, is that it's relaxing or all kind of restorative. Restorative yoga is actually something that's pretty much brand new in the yoga world. It started in like the 70s, 80s. So that it wasn't even like necessarily a part of yoga until recently.
Obviously, you've been practicing for a while now. Tell us a little bit about the I guess the how has your practice evolved? What sort of challenges have you sort of had to face along the way? Because I know it's not a linear journey.
Yeah, so I actually started in Iyengar. So I have a love for alignment and prop use, and that's where that comes from. But in my 20s, I lived in Los Angeles, and this is like the mecca of yoga. Like, yoga in the West started in LA. So you've got the strongest yoga movement there, some of the arguably the best yoga teachers, and people are really into it there. And so I was like very impressionable, like in my 20s, of just like, oh, this is so cool. And people were doing, it was vinyasa. People were doing these like cool transitions. And I was just like, oh. So I kind of married my love for alignment with my love for a strong kind of vinyasa practice. And that's what I did throughout my 20s. I actually practiced yoga 10 years before I did a teacher training. And then I did my teacher training and I started teaching, and that's a whole journey in and of itself. But I took a little bit of a break in my 30s. I wanted a family, and I was worried that yoga as a career couldn't sustain me. And so I kind of left the yoga world and I went to Columbia University in New York. I did like a hard move from LA to New York, and I just immersed myself in academia. And at the same time, I had hurt my back. I was starting to go through just horrible back pain. And so I was kind of off the yoga path for a few years. And then when I decided to come back to yoga, everything was different, Marty. Like, because before there was no social media. I didn't even have a cell phone, like, and now it was just like all social media. Vinyasa was everywhere and everything was just different. And I had my second child, and I was staying at home with her because she had a condition the first year of her life, and it was this very quiet time for me. And literally rolled out my mat, hadn't practiced in or taught in like a year or two, was in a lot of back pain, and I just committed. This is where that athlete comes in, to practicing 2 times a day. So I'd practice one time when she was napping and one time when she was awake, and I'd lay her on my mat. And I did more of like conditioning, and then one like a more kind of traditional yoga practice. And this was a quiet time for me where I started to question everything I had learned as a yoga teacher and student, when I was younger. And it was a time in which I feel like I became my own teacher because of that questioning. And I started to do my own research, and I'd be like, well, I was always told this, but that anatomically doesn't make any sense. Like, why were we doing it that way? Maybe like, let's try it this way. And I started teaching yoga again, and I started testing a lot of things out on my students and then seeing results. And that's when I feel like I really became my own teacher. But it was having gone back to school, and I went to grad school and everything, I think that helped me learn how to develop these programs. So I'm glad I took that time away from yoga and went and got myself educated and learned how to, write a thesis and do research, because I really do to this day still apply those things, to my teaching and my business.
What are some of those things that you were challenging? Actually, I'd be curious to hear, like, what were some of the things that you said you had learned when you were younger that then when you got started again, you were saying, wait, let me try this with a student and see what happens. What are some of those things that stood out?
Gosh, I could write a book on this. So I'll just give you one example. And it's like no one's fault. Like, we're all getting better, we're all evolving, But what we have now in the West is like trained people, anatomy experts, doctors coming in and examining the body and looking at things and going, maybe y'all shouldn't do it like that. Or, we also have now years of students practicing yoga, and we can see now common injuries coming out of yoga, things like torn rotator cuff muscles and hips and stuff like that. And so we can start to say, oh, maybe doing it this way isn't actually healthy and good for people's bodies, and maybe we should re-examine that. And so this is a little off topic, but to give you, I think, the most like biggest example is when I learned how to do handstand in my 20s. I was so handstands when you're like balancing on your hands, right, and your arms are straight. I was always told to depress my shoulders down. Okay. And that creates like a banana back shape in your back. And people that do handstands or are learning handstands or in yoga, they know what that word means, banana back, right? And it's something you don't want, right? And it also really compresses the spine. Yeah. And, I realized that like the shoulder joint, your shoulder blades, we don't want to pull down because our arms are in flexion above our head. And when our arms are in flexion above our head, the shoulder blades naturally go in upward rotation. So when we then push down, it's just like going opposite what the body anatomically is designed to do. And so it creates a lot of instability in the shoulder girdle. And you don't want instability when you're balancing on your hands and your shoulder is now the new place of stability. When we're standing on our feet, our hips are the place of stability, right? And so that's a prime example. It's like I literally learned the exact opposite way, I think, and now all handstand teachers and coaches know it should be. Like, we want the shoulder blades actually in elevation. We want to go this way, not this way, right? So elevation, not depression. So that's a good example. It's just like, a lot of like outdated stuff. And I think that can be a danger of any practitioner in any movement modality who doesn't stay up to date and learn how their practice is evolving and learn from new experts coming in. It can be dangerous to, stay rigid with what you're teaching and think it's going to last 20, 30 years. Like, my teaching has evolved so much, just I'm constantly learning new things and pulling things in from other modalities and doing research and everything.
I mean, is that a challenge you see in the industry in general? Because these are, practices that originate from thousands of years, let's say. So are people more rigid because they're like, well, it's 1,000 years old? Um, you know, they're less open to hearing, new theories or new ways of doing things. Is that a bit of a challenge you see? Sort of people, as you said, staying rigid.
Yeah, I think that there's a slight, and I'm one of those, I'm a non-dogmatic yoga teacher. I think we just want to always ask why. Why do we do things this way and what is the benefit? And as long as you can provide a rational answer to that question, then you do you. And like, there's no one perfect way to do a pose. But I do think there's a slight divide with something like Ashtanga yoga, which, as I was saying, kind of comes out of the grandfather of modern day yoga and is a style of yoga that is dogmatic, that does not want to change. And, good for them, because that's their thing. Like, that's their like stamp in the yoga world, right? But that does create a little bit of a divide between all of the other people that are evolving in the practice, and then there becomes a bit of a tension and a little bit of I know, not fighting, just challenging each other in this way. So I think it's a normal part, and you know what, like, that's fine, because that's a dialectic, and that's how we grow and evolve and educate. If we didn't have that kind of controversy, I don't think any of us would be that curious to change and evolve the practice.
Cool now that there's obviously new expertise evolving in different areas of anatomy and movement, and bringing each of a little parts of each of those together and questioning, your own practice or own methodology can lead to good insights, like the handstand approach, for example. So yeah, that's really cool. So just connecting the dots again on your timeline. So it's back to that moment when you started to get into yoga again, and how that progressed into you going full time at it again. That's what I'd be curious to hear. Did you start teaching in local classes? Yeah, what did you do?
So yeah, I had, graduated with a master's degree, tried to join like corporate America, and I was absolutely miserable. And I sat, this is the time that I got on my mat and I was with my baby, and I just kind of meditated and thought, like, what am I doing? I think I was at a huge pivotal shift in my life. I was in my, I don't know, almost 40 or something. And uh, as crazy as this sounds, I was driving one day and I heard a gong like sound, and I heard a voice. And this has never happened to me, but the voice said, you're going to teach yoga again, and you'll open up a yoga studio. And I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that, but when that voice is that loud and that clear, I didn't even question it. I was like, okay. And I was sitting at a pool one day with some friends, and I just said, I'm going to teach yoga again. And one of the guys said, oh, they're opening a yoga studio right around the corner. I know the owner, she's franchising. Do you want me to connect you? And I said, okay. And that was kind of the start. So I started teaching for them locally. And now no one knew me there, but I had come from LA and I'd been around the yoga world for a while. So I think that helped me there build a reputation of credibility. And my classes just started, it was crazy, Marty. There was like a wait list of like 28 people, like in my yoga classes. Like the wait list was almost bigger than what we could fill in the room. After a year of that, it just became obvious that I should have my own studio. So I opened my own studio, actually franchised, and I helped develop their yoga teacher trainings. I helped design their classes and then train the teachers on the classes. And I actually, while there, approached the founder and I said, you know, if you ever go online, like if you ever want to do videos, now this is like 10 years ago, you know, I was like, I want to do it. Like, and she was like, do it. And so while I was there, I produced 200 yoga videos. I actually filmed them, directed them, edited them, got them all up online onto their online platform. I was in 40 of them. And it was kind of a great training for me. And it was actually exactly why I wanted to do it. So then I decided to produce my own online series outside of that, kind of put a lot of money into it. At the time, it was like $5,000, which seemed like a lot to me. And at the time I was also getting myself online. So I was kind of building a local following. And then I joined YouTube. I got onto Instagram, but more as like a user, you know. I was just like posting, I don't know, my practice and stuff. And um, so I decided I wanted to build my first online series. And again, this is a long time ago. This is like way before COVID. And I had about 30,000 Instagram followers. So I did decide to take Instagram seriously. I started building my following. I had about 30,000 followers. I launched my new program called Activate Your Core, which, you know, I developed myself during that time I was talking about at home with my baby, and just applying these conditioning techniques to help build strength for your yoga practice. And I launched it and it did okay. Like, I don't know, maybe I sold like 30 units, you know. And then I moved and I left my yoga studio, and all kinds of life stuff happened. I separated with my husband. I moved to Florida, and then COVID happened. And when I left the yoga studio and separated from my ex, I I was in Florida, and I needed money, you know. And so I started, this is right before COVID, I started a new business model, which was going to be retreats. And I invested my own money into it. And I think I spent about $40,000, which for me was a lot of money. And then COVID happened, and I lost all my money, all of it. None of the retreat centers would give me only one gave me a deposit back, but it was like $1,500. None of the retreat places would give me my money back. But I was ethical, so I gave all my students money back. So I ended up losing 40 grand. And I was a single mom, 2 kids. Their dad was out of state. I was just like, Marty, I was at the lowest low. You know, I was like, I don't know what to do. I felt paralyzed. Had about 80,000 Instagram followers at that point. And I just, this is going to sound crazy, but I just did nothing for 3 weeks. I cried and I meditated. And I had this idea. I had a couple ideas. And one was to put Activate Your Core on sale again. Now, it was 3 or 4 years old, but I was like, well, I have 50,000 new followers and everyone's at home. Why don't I just put that on sale? So I did like a 3-day sale, and it sold 100 units in 3 days. And I was like, oh, it's like, all right. Yeah. So I was like, maybe I should film another one of these. So I reached out to a studio, local yoga studio that was closed because of COVID. And I said, can I use your studio? I'll pay you. And I went myself and I filmed my next series, Activate Your Handstand. I filmed it, I edited it myself. So it was $0. I didn't spend any money except for the yoga studio. And I launched that like 3 weeks later because I was just at home, you know, edited real quick. 3 weeks later, same thing. like sold 100 units in 3 days. And I was like, what is happening? It's like, I think I have a business here. And then people started to message me because everyone was at home for a while, and they all knew I led teacher trainings in the past. And they said, would you put a teacher training online? And my first reaction was, no, you can't do that. You can't train yoga teachers online. And then it just sat with me, and it was like gnawing at me. And I was like, you know what? You can do that. Like, you can set a high standard, because everyone was just throwing their yoga teacher trainings online in Zoom sessions, like 7-hour long Zoom sessions. And I knew from creating as much online content as I did that that's not sustainable. It's not evergreen content. People are not going to have a good experience sitting on Zoom calls for 7-hour days. And so I really saw this gap, and I said, I can fill this gap. I can set a high standard for online yoga education. I can be, one of the first people to make an amazing online yoga teacher training, short form, evergreen content with live sessions with me. And that's what I did. And I took this huge risk, Marty, because I had no money. And I literally had $0. I didn't know even how I was going to pay rent. And I reached out to the videographer I worked for, because I knew it would be a lot of heavy lifting to get a 200-hour online yoga teacher training up. I knew I needed help. And I opened registration without an actual product. I don't ever recommend this to anyone, but I had to take a risk. I had to. I just felt like I didn't have the money. And I promised myself, if I didn't do it, I'd give all the money back to everyone. And my break even point was 8. I needed 8 people to pay the videographer to film and edit all the videos. So that was my break even point. And I remember, Marty, when I launched an open registration, it was like 3 weeks of the most stress and pressure I've ever felt. Couldn't sleep at night. I was just waiting for those 8 people. And by the end of 3 weeks, I had over 30 people registered. And this was a high ticket item. It was like, I don't know, $1,500 at the time. And I had $0. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my goodness. And within 6 months, I was building a 6-figure business, and it's only like continuing to build and build and build. And I don't know, I think the big lesson there is a lot of times our best ideas can come at our lowest points. And also in business, with the economy, with like when stuff is going down and everyone's freaking out, if you can be that person to step up and pull your bootstraps up and take a huge risk, you're going to come out on top when everything, and that's what happened. And, I just look back at that time, and I'm so grateful that I didn't just sit in fear, or like go try to get a regular job or something like that. I'm so grateful. So yeah, it was a really auspicious time. And then it's just continued to build. I now have 14 online yoga courses in all different aspects, from anatomy to yin yoga to, arm balances, handstands. I have a beginner series. And I feel like I have a full-fledged school. I also built out a 300-hour online yoga teacher training. So that's an advanced teacher training. So you can train with me and get the highest level of Yoga Alliance approved credits as a yoga teacher, which is your 500 hour. And yeah, I had this vision, and I just got to work, and I've filmed thousands of videos at this point. I mean, there are over 1,000 videos in my courses. It's really wild.
Yeah, that's incredible. It sounds like it was the perfect storm for you almost. And as you said, it was the big changes in your personal life, and then COVID hitting, and that pressure to make something work, and then you taking the risk, to sort of, well, seeing the gap in the market as well, which I think is like big credit to you to see that, and so yeah, then go for it, take that risk, that financial risk. And that's, the beauty of online education. And one of the things I love about it so much is, I guess two big lessons there is one, the power of building an audience. As you said, you had 80,000 people that you'd built up over many years. I assume it took a while to get there. And then, it's quite, it's quite a nice thing to hear actually from you in terms of you built this audience and then you almost fell into monetizing it, sort of by surprise. You're sort of like, oh, wait, I've got this course and I've got 50,000 new followers. Of course, why don't I promote my course? And I find that, that's credit to you, and shows sort of where you come from as a creator and a teacher of like you're producing value, you're creating, good content for people, and then you're saying, hey, I also have these paid products. And that's really cool that you sort of fell into that. And then yeah, the power of a high ticket education product that is evergreen, as you said, um at that time during COVID. So cool that that was able to work for you. And now you've got this amazing online series, which is across the board. And that's sort of how you stood out to me. And sort of where your brand caught my attention is, yeah, you're sort of really pioneering this as a sole creator and teacher, with a fully fledged yoga school, from the beginner classes to intermediate to advanced through to a teacher training. And that is incredibly, yeah, as you said, thousands of hours of content to create that and handle that and run a business. So as a mum, as a as someone that's had to do all that themselves, like it's really cool to see. I'm curious now, now you've got the sort of the online series, a good range of those in place. You've got the teacher trainings. Where do you see it evolving from here? Where do you still want to get to? What are you sort of working on in terms of the business moving forward from here?
Well, I'm in this interesting spot where I am currently have a condition with my spine where I can't physically practice. And similar to that perfect storm moment, I've learned my lesson enough to know that this is not a time for me to feel sorry for myself and be like, oh, well, I guess I can't do yoga or I can't teach. That this is an opportunity for me to pivot or evolve or change even the the online education space in the way yoga teachers have been doing it thus far. And so, to give you an example with my content now, if you go onto my page, you'll notice something, and that is I am not practicing. I'm using my yoga students and as yoga models, and and I'm doing the same when I lead the lives in my teacher training. And what this experience is showing me is a couple different things. Is I think as teachers, especially those in some kind of movement modality where, let's be real, we are going to peak at a certain point and then we are going to age at a certain point. And if you want a sustainable career, the irony is it's a lot of the older people that have the experience and are seasoned teachers that are some of the strongest teachers, but they might not have that physical practice anymore. And so I think I'm very interested right now in um, exploring new ways to educate online and maybe even pioneering a new kind of way to teach these kind of physical movements where the teacher doesn't have to do the movement. There's always that pressure, I think, as a teacher to do while teaching. But what I'm discovering is that I'm an even better teacher when I don't have to do, when I can really watch all of my students and be that coach, give them all that personalized attention while I have a yoga model demoing for me. And so I'm kind of curious how that's going to shift things for me as an instructor. And also now that I have a much bigger following, right? Closer to 200,000 now, and I'm on YouTube and TikTok and all that stuff. Like, can I influence and help reshape a little bit of that online education model in the way that we've thought about it before? Even with AI, coming out, like, are there ways that we can use that and not overuse our own physical bodies, where we can educate. So I'm very excited to keep expanding my school. You know, the other thing is I have trained over 400 yoga teachers in 45 countries. I have a beautiful network of yoga teachers that I want to elevate in some capacity. And so I'm exploring how I want to do that, whether that's through my school or supporting them through their own ventures or something like that. So I'm really excited for this next, phase or evolution of what's happening. And I think it's a good lesson for all of us that when you are either physically injured or something in your life, that it doesn't, your work and your passions don't need to stop. They just need to adapt. And there's such an abundance of people. I think it's hard for us to comprehend. But as I've shared more of my story online about what's happening with my body, what I get is all of these new new people, new audiences that is like, "Oh, I was injured," or "Oh, I can't do these poses because I have this, condition," or and it's like, wow, there's so many people out there, that you can explore and bring into your community as you shift and evolve and have new things to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really, cool new way for people um, to connect with you, because you're sharing a more vulnerable side of, hey, look, I can't practice at the moment, and people can see, I guess what people would appreciate most about that is that they've seen what you can do, what you have been able to do for a very, very long time. I mean, you're in impeccable, fitness and shape, and your practice is obviously so advanced, and then to come out and say, hey, I can't practice right now, makes it very relatable, or like, it gives a sense of humanness, to the whole experience. And I think people would really, really appreciate that, particularly those that have experienced some sort of pain, or disablement in some form, which most people have, at some point in their life where they haven't been able to practice and do what they want. So that's really cool. And like, I'm excited to see how that evolves for you in terms of, yeah, as you said, like that's a whole new perspective of teaching, a different angle that you're getting now of like taking the step back, using the teacher guide, and being more closely involved with the students. And I can see why that will offer something unique for you again, for your school. So yeah, excited to see how that continues to evolve. Um, I'd love to sort of pivot a little bit because we've spoken a little bit about your social media following, but obviously you've done quite well in that area. Tell us about your content creation strategy. How has that evolved? What's your strategy? What's working for you? What do you like to do? Yeah, everything content would be cool to hear.
I love creating content. I was an actress when I was young. I lived in LA. And so I just love, I don't know, I love filming. I love being on camera. I love editing. I love all of it. And so for me, it's very fun and creative and a creative outlet. And that's why I think I've lasted as long as I have and continue to, nearly daily for the last 10 years post content. And so my process I have streamlined because I am running a business as well. I've got kids, it's like, so I do batch content, meaning I'll film about one day a week and I pre-plan the content. I actually teach also social media. I have a 60-day social media boot camp. And every time I run that, honestly, it just makes me better. Like you'll notice my account's really growing because every time I run it, I'm applying everything I'm teaching and, doing the work again. And so one of the tips that I do is I diversify my content. Meaning, for instance, like I am a yoga teacher, I could have just a page filled with tutorial based content. And a lot of people do that, and some of the accounts do really well. But so that's an example of just like one style of content. But I like to have very different styles of content. So you'll see some comedy in mine, you'll see some lip syncing, you'll see some high concept, almost like skit ideas where I bring in other yoga teachers and we do these kind of skits and stuff. And I even every once in a while will bring in my kids or something like that. And why I do that and why I think it's so important to diversify your content is be back to this whole thing is like things change so quickly, things evolve. Even like tutorial based content is now so different. Like you can't do anymore the 3 steps to getting crow pose. Like that stuff doesn't fly anymore. People don't want to see it anymore. So even like you want to stay in front of creating content and just keep it fresh and change it a lot and test new things. I think it's so easy to just be like, oh, yeah, that works. So I'll just keep doing that. But people get bored after a while. And so like you have to test different things and evolve and be able to adapt and shift and everything. So I think like, I if you look back and you scroll back to the 2,500, 3,000 posts I posted, you'll see all of the changes and all of the evolution. And, even things like I used to lease a space to film. It was a really pretty, just clean white space. But after COVID, like people want to see you in your home. Like they don't want that clean. So it's like you have to change with, and and then also creating your own templates, like the way you edit or the way you present your content rather than copying other people's, I think is another useful thing so that you actually become a trendsetter and then people come to you to look to, be influenced or inspired, I think is another thing. So I know that that was a lot of tips, but I think just for everyone's mental health on social media, starting to plan your content a little bit. So I'll write down some different hooks. Like hooks are the kind of things that grab you in the first 3 seconds. Or for my tutorials, I'll write down some of the things that I know I'm really good at teaching. That's kind of easy for me, but maybe new to other people. And I'll kind of write those down. I'll put together a short shot list for each of them so that when I go to film on filming day and I just carve out like maybe 2 hours, I know exactly what I'm doing and I just film it, I bang it out. And then that way I can then I just edit throughout the week and post. So it's like I have about 1 to 2 hours of planning my content, 1 to 2 hours of filming my content, and then editing. Another big tip I'll give you all that I teach my boot campers is I call it going down the rabbit hole. So if you want to be a content creator and you want to grow your social media following, which if you're in the online space, you have to do, I think, is you want to stop being a consumer on social media, like stop mindlessly scrolling, but intentionally be scrolling on social media and saving great music and sounds and looking at trends and seeing hooks that are compelling and just collecting it. And I call it going down the rabbit hole where maybe 30 minutes a day, you're just kind of getting lost on Instagram or whatever platform you're on and getting so that you're always very in touch with what's happening. And so that's what I do. And for me, I don't even necessarily stay in my niche, the yoga industry. I don't even stay in there. I look at all different types of creators, just kind of whatever's in my feed. And that's been very useful. I want to comment on something you mentioned earlier about how in some ways it almost looks like I went backwards by today's standards. Like I built an audience first and then monetized it. And I do think that's a mistake, that is the way to go, and that a mistake that a lot of new people coming onto social media are doing now is they think they have to have a product and they think they have to have a freebie and a link tree, and so they come onto social media with a few hundred followers and they're already selling. And I think that that's the biggest mistake, that you want to first grow an audience and build trust And honestly, that could take years. It took years for me to do that. So that when I finally had a product, people bought it from me because they trusted me, right? And that's something I can't recommend enough. Like, build your following. Don't try to make money off of it right away. Build your following, establish your credibility, start even partnering with brands to be exposed even more. And then a lot of my products actually come out of my community. They ask me for it. Like the social media boot camp. I didn't want to do that. I'm a yoga teacher, but people were asking me for it. So I developed a training for them. So that's like, build your community and then serve your community.
Such good advice. Like one of our other guests, Igor, said the exact same thing. He's a creator on has a big YouTube channel, and he said the exact same thing. Just build a community, provide content, get better at creating content. As well. Like, it's taken you years to refine your approach, your strategy, and yeah, I think we live in a world, where we see those things. How I got 30,000 followers in the last 30 days, or and it creates this illusion of what the game is about. And for me, it's create value and stay in the game for a longer period of time. Like, that's, I think, a short-term approach a lot of people have, that you're saying, is like, they think they need to create content and then try and sell something straight away. And if that's not working, then it's like, oh, it's not going to work for me. But yeah, how many years have you had your Instagram account?
9 or 10 years. I think 2015 is my first post. 9 years. Yeah.
What's I'd love to hear, you're obviously very passionate about it. You love a lot of it. But what would be one of the hardest things for you about promoting yourself as a creator? Like, putting yourself out there. What's one of the hardest things you found across those last 10 years, as being a content creator?
I think it's for me knowing how much of my personal life to share and my struggles, especially as I'm running a business. So I remember when it was very clear to me that I couldn't practice yoga right now. I was a little scared to share any of that because I'm also running a business. Am I going to alarm people? Are they going to think, oh, she's not going to do her next teacher training, And so, but yet at the same time, in our culture right now, we all really value transparency, authenticity, realness. And so it's like finding that balance of sharing what's happening without also alarming people. I think for me has been my biggest struggle. I could have not said anything. I could have kind of, like, I'm online, no one can really see what's going on. I have a ton of content. I could have just kept re-editing and repurposing, but I think that I didn't want to take that approach. And so it felt really risky to me, but it's been well received. And I think shifting gracefully and using the yoga models has definitely helped.
Interesting. And I think the tough thing about that one is there isn't really a rule on what's the right amount to share. And, like, I mean, no one's got the answer to that, like, that's it's such on a case by case basis. And I think every content creator, or anyone, marketing their own business from a personal brand perspective, and even from a, business corporate perspective, yeah, being obviously transparent is very valued. But yeah, where is that line? How much? When is it beneficial? When is it not beneficial? So yeah, that's a tough one for sure. But it sounds like you've struck the right balance there, of, yeah, showing the challenges, but also saying, hey, this also means that we can offer something new and something different. And I think that's, as you said, in those tough times, there's always opportunities that present themselves, and it sounds like you're taking that opportunity. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your community that you've built, because that's been a big part of, your strategy since you've started. Is you've not only done the online exposure, but you've had events. You've done lots of events in person as well. What do you love most about the community that you've created?
I think one of the things that gives me like chills when I think about it, and I heard a coach, a social media coach, talk about this, and I cannot remember his name. Um, but he said something like, "You don't build your community builds it." And I just thought, wow, that is so right. I had no idea that a community would come out of what I was doing. Like, I didn't build my teacher training and say, oh, I've got to think about community. It wasn't even on my mind, to be honest with you. And then what happened was the community kind of formed itself. Now, I fostered it. For instance, in my teacher training, it was one of the smartest things I did was I have small groups. I put everyone into groups of 5 over the course of the teacher training. And these small groups, they just, they practice together, they meet up, they chat, and they've become like friends for life. And everyone loves their small groups. And I think that sense of community started to build, and then the small groups kind of came together. And I would host social media challenges under my school, and everyone would, not everyone, but people from the trainings would join them. And every time I launched a new series, I would have an Instagram social media challenge. So, uh, just really offering different ways for people to connect. We have a hashtag Cathy Madeo YTT, and I use WhatsApp chat, the community chat, to keep everyone connected. I do a monthly newsletter, um, and so the community really formed itself, and it's so beautiful because anyone who's doing anything, okay, a creator or a teacher, like-minded people attract to you, you know, maybe even for the same reason. It's almost like a magnet. And so those people have a lot in common, even though they're all different from all different walks of life and backgrounds, they have a lot of common. They have this shared thing that they love. And that is just priceless. And so continuing to offer opportunities for them to get together is what I think is really great. So it started with me hosting retreats. What would happen, I mean, they're open for anyone to take, but generally a large percentage of the people that come on that are alumni from my school. And so that was like the first time we would meet in real life. And you train 500 hours online and you finally meet that person in real life. I mean, there are no words to describe that feeling. And then so people would come on the retreats again, and it was just this like really amazing thing. And then people on social media would see the alumni, other alumni would see, and then they'd get FOMO and they'd want to go, right? And so I decided last year to start an annual, I call it the Cathy Madeo Yoga Alumni Event. It happens in Miami. It's going to happen every year in October, and it's like a weekend event. And I bring in teachers from the school. So it's like my starting point of starting to start a platform for them. My vision is that it turns into a yoga like conference or festival, that we open it up to the public as it builds. So that was like, we did the first one last October. 25 people flew in from all over, and we spent the whole weekend together. I rented a beautiful space called Sacred Space Miami on Sunday, and we had the like festival that day. We had 5 different teachers teach, and I taught the last class, and it was just phenomenal to watch everyone come together. They have their own friendships and relationships. Like, I'm like the mama bear, and it's just phenomenal. So I want to keep that energy and momentum and excitement going every year. And I even have a vision of, because people have asked me, of taking that alumni event to other places. Like, I get kind of pockets of people. Like, I have a large pocket of graduates in the Germany, Sweden area. So I was thinking of doing one there, because that's kind of too far for them to come just for a weekend. Even the New York, the Northeast. So I want to kind of build maybe 2 or 3 of these alumni events and just give the alumni a space to come together and also teach. And then again, maybe if it does well, I can grow it out and we can actually sell tickets to the public and give them a space to teach.
One more thing I'd like to ask you, you know, because you've obviously got a lot of experience from building up an online education business and your own brand. For anyone that is starting an online education business, an online course business, or considering getting into content creation and starting in this space, what advice would you give to them? What would be one piece of advice?
Production over perfection. We talked about this. I'm a perfectionist and I have a high standard for, like, when you go into my online courses, they look good. The sound quality is perfect, the lighting, the editing, like, they look good. I have a high standard. But it didn't start that way. I had to, you know, through producing a ton of content, it got better and better and better. And so you have to start somewhere. Do not let, perfection stop you. Just get started and keep making a ton of content. People just want to keep consuming so much content every day. The market is not saturated. Get out of your limiting beliefs and just do the work. And another idea I was having as we were talking is, you've probably heard this advice of, like, just get really good, like, just do one product and make it really, really good. I want to challenge that a little bit, because I think part of the success of my school is that it wasn't just one product. It's that you go to my school and you're like, oh, this is robust. This is a lot of courses. This is a, a journey I could take, versus people just make one course or series, it sells a little, and then they're like, that failed. And then they just stop. If we go back to my origin story with Activate Your Core, my first online series, it only sold 30 units, but I didn't stop. I kept going and kept producing content and kept making it better. So yeah, production over perfection.
I think that also adds an air of credibility to your brand as well, when people can see, oh, it's not, not just a one trick pony. You've got multiple, areas that you've covered, and also tailored to different skill levels as well, because not everyone's going to be at the same level. I know you've got the beginner courses and intermediate and more advanced stuff as well. um, but yeah, I can imagine in the early stages, as you said, get that first one up, don't get caught up on the tiny details that are going to hold you back. Get out of those limiting beliefs. And for sure, we all have them, like starting this podcast, myself, there's always that little voice in the back of your head sort of saying, but it's been done already, or there's no one's going to want to listen to that. But yeah, the more I speak to people like yourself, the more I start to see, you see the bigger picture. You've been in this game for 10 years, and it's easy for us or people to look at you and say, but they've got, she's got almost 200,000 followers on Instagram. Must be easy for her. But that's like, just such a short view, and it's the tip of the iceberg. What everything you've done behind it, and the perfect storm moments that you've had along the way that have, it's just it's unrealistic to look at, and have all of those thoughts that come into your head of why you shouldn't do it and why you shouldn't start. And I think for sure one thing I've taken away from chatting to you today is just get in the game, create good content, get better at creating good content, and stay in the game, like stay in it for the long haul. Because, and I've seen that a lot more from other people in this space, just saying like, look, my YouTube account did grow 30,000 subscribers in the last month, but let me tell you why that's not the thing you should be focusing on. Because for 2 years before that, I got, only 10,000 subscribers, and some videos got like 100 views or something like that. And, no one wants to hear that, and no one wants to accept that, yeah, it's a long road. Of course, you can strike some luck along the way. That's a cool thing. And if you do, then that's great. But I think it's better to just be focused on ticking away, staying consistent. I mean, the fact that you've done this for 10 years is wild.
Yeah, and I taught 10 years, but so I've been teaching 20 years. And that's the other thing, like if you're teaching something like online education, like it's both. You want to be really good at marketing and social media, but then you want to be really good at what you do. Really, really good. And that comes through years of doing it. So get on the saddle and don't get off, you know? Like there's no way to become a good teacher except for teaching. Like that's it. You can, learn as much as you want, but you got to get in there. You got to get in there and just do it over and over and over and over again.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. This has been super fun to have you on and chat across all of these topics. Just before we finish, if anyone wants to learn anything more about what you've shared today, where should they go to?
They should go to my website, cathymadeoyoga.com, but you can also find me at Cathy Madeo Yoga on all social platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and then of course YouTube, which I know is a search engine, but you can find me there, Cathy Madeo Yoga.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to chat with you.